Ifeananya was 26, a quiet but sharp finance graduate living in the busy city of Lagos. Every morning before the sun fully rose, she was already at her father's company, Okiri Builders Limited, checking numbers, reviewing contracts, and making sure every kobo was in the right place. The company had grown into one of the biggest construction firms in Nigeria, and everyone inside the tall glass building knew that Ifeanyanya's calm discipline kept it steady. Yet few people outside the boardroom even knew her name. Her late mother used to call her "my gentle lion," and the memory of that soft voice was what kept her heart steady whenever work felt heavy. Life at home, however, felt nothing like the steady rhythm of the office. Her father, Chief Emeka Okiri, once a man who shared late-night tea and business ideas with her, had changed. Since marrying his new wife, Nkechi, a glamorous woman barely older than Ifeananya, the house had turned into a stage where Ifeananya no longer belonged. Dinner conversations revolved around Nkechi's parties, her designer clothes, and her endless demands. Sometimes, Chief Emeka barely noticed when Ifeananya walked into the room. It was as if the daughter who had carried the company on her shoulders had turned invisible overnight. Still, Ifeananya stayed. She buried her hurt behind polite smiles, focusing on spreadsheets and project plans, silently promising herself that her mother's hard work and the family legacy would not be erased, no matter how loudly the new queen of the house tried to shine. Nkechi entered the Okiri mansion like a bright, glittering storm. At first, her arrival seemed harmless. She laughed easily, dressed like a movie star, and filled the house with expensive perfumes and flashy decorations. But it didn't take long for Ifeananya to notice the quiet changes. Nkechi was only a few years older than her, yet she carried herself like a queen who believed everyone should bow. She called the house staff by sharp nicknames, rearranged family photos to put herself in the center, and acted as though she had always belonged in this world of wealth and power. Chief Emeka, who once valued Ifeanyanya's opinions on every business decision, now listened only to his new wife's sugary whispers. During dinners, Nkechi would lean close to him, her soft voice laced with poison. "She's too soft for business," Ifeananya overheard one evening when she passed by the dining room. "She doesn't have the toughness this company needs. Let the men handle it." Her father's low laugh followed, cutting through Ifeanyanya's chest like a blade. The man who once encouraged her to fight for every contract now nodded along as another woman, one who barely knew the company, questioned her strength. Soon the changes at work became impossible to ignore. Budgets that Ifeananya had balanced with care were suddenly tampered with. Contracts that were supposed to go to trusted partners were quietly redirected to Nkechi's cousins and old friends. Meetings were scheduled without her knowledge. Staff members who used to greet her with respect now looked nervous when they saw her coming, as if they had been warned to keep their distance. Ifeananya spent late nights in the office, combing through spreadsheets and emails, her heart sinking with every suspicious figure she uncovered. At home, Nkechi's power grew bolder. She hosted loud weekend parties where strange faces filled the mansion, laughing and drinking while family portraits collected dust. Sometimes, Ifeananya would return from the office to find her own belongings moved, her mother's favorite vase pushed into a corner, her late mother's photo replaced with a new framed portrait of Nkechi in glittering clothes. It felt like someone was slowly erasing her history, one careless gesture at a time. Ifeananya tried to speak to her father, but each attempt ended in frustration. Chief Emeka would wave her off with a distracted smile, saying, "You worry too much, my daughter. Nkechi just wants the best for the family." But Ifeananya could see the truth in his eyes. He was captivated, lost in a world of charm and flattery. Every day, the gap between father and daughter grew wider, until it felt like they lived in two different worlds under the same roof. Still, Ifeananya refused to let despair win. Behind her calm face, she stored every detail and every strange transaction. She knew the company her mother helped build was slipping into dangerous hands, and she silently vowed that no amount of glitter or sweet words would destroy the legacy her mother left behind. The morning of the board meeting started like any other, but Ifeananya felt a strange heaviness in the air as she stepped into the conference room. The long polished table shone under the bright lights, and the board members, men and women who had watched her grow up in the company, sat stiffly in their seats. Her father, Chief Emeka, stood at the head of the table in his usual flowing agbada, but there was something different in his face. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that warned of a storm. Ifeanyi took her seat with her notebook and files, ready to discuss the monthly budget, but instead of the usual reports, Chief Emeka cleared his throat and announced in a voice that echoed through the room, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we make an important change for the future of Okiri Builders." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. "From this day forward, my beloved wife, Mrs. Nkechi Okiri, will serve as the acting family representative on this board. My daughter, Ifeanyi, will step aside to focus on other responsibilities." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Papers stopped rustling, pens stopped tapping. Several board members exchanged startled glances, their eyes darting toward Ifeanyi. She felt every gaze land on her like a weight she could not lift. Her ears rang as her father's words sank in, each syllable a knife slicing through years of loyalty and late nights at the office. Acting family representative. Step aside. It sounded so casual, as if he were asking her to change seats at the table instead of stripping her of the position she had poured her life into. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay still. "Father," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "what does this mean?" Chief Emeka didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the board members as if she weren't even in the room. "It means," he said calmly, "that Nkechi will take on the family's business duties. We need a fresh face, a stronger hand." Fresh face. A stronger hand. The words burned. Ifeanyi wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to remind him of every contract she had secured, every crisis she had quietly solved. But the boardroom felt like a cage. Around the table, some members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Not one person dared to challenge the chief. Nkechi sat beside him, her lips curved in a small, satisfied smile. Her perfectly manicured fingers rested lightly on the table, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Ifeanyi's chest ached, but she kept her back straight. She would not give them the pleasure of seeing her break. Inside, though, it felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her feet. The man who once called her his pride could not even meet her eyes. Ifeanyi barely remembered how she walked out of the boardroom. Her legs moved on their own, carrying her through the hallway of glass walls and polished floors until she reached the safety of her office. The moment the door closed behind her, the strength she had forced into her posture cracked like thin glass. She sank into her chair and pressed her palms against her face, but the tears broke through anyway, hot, heavy, unstoppable. The quiet hum of the air conditioner felt deafening in the emptiness. For years she had given everything to this company, staying late when everyone else went home, carrying the weight of her mother's dreams. And now, with a single cold announcement, her father had swept her aside as if she were nothing more than an assistant. She thought of her mother and the nights they had spent together when she was a child, folding building plans across the dining table while her father worked late. "This company is your heartbeat too," her mother used to say with a proud smile. Those words echoed now like a ghost, making the betrayal cut even deeper. How could her father forget all of it? How could he give her place to a woman who barely knew the difference between cement and sand? A soft knock on the door pulled her back. Before she could wipe her face, the door opened and Keane stepped in. He had been her childhood friend since their school days and now worked as the company's legal advisor. One look at her tear-streaked face, and his expression shifted from concern to quiet fury. He closed the door behind him and crossed the room, kneeling slightly so his eyes met hers. "Ife," he said gently, using the nickname only close friends dared to use. "Don't let them see you like this. Cry if you need to, but don't give them your defeat." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "Keane, it's over. My own father, he chose her over me. What power do I even have left?" Keane leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the walls might be listening. "You have more power than you think. Do you remember your mother's shares?" Ifeanyi blinked through her tears. "Her shares? But they've been silent since." "They're not gone," Keane interrupted, his tone firm. "Your mother placed them in a legal trust. It's airtight. The board still respects that trust." If you claim those shares, you can challenge any decision that threatens the company's stability, even the appointment of Nkechi. His words cut through the fog of grief like a sharp blade. Ifeanyi sat up straighter, her heart pounding. Her mother had always been careful, always thinking ahead. Could it be that she had left a shield for this very moment? Keen placed a reassuring hand on her desk. This isn't about anger, Ife. It's about strategy. Let them think they've won today. But we'll move carefully. We'll gather evidence, watch every transfer, and when the time is right, you'll take back what belongs to you. For the first time that day, Ifeanyi felt a spark of hope flicker through the pain. Her father's betrayal still burned, but her mother's silent strength whispered through the years. The game was not over. The days after the board meeting felt like walking through a storm that only she could hear. On the outside, Ifeanyi moved with her usual quiet grace, signing documents, greeting staff, attending routine meetings. Inside, though, her heart beat with a new fire. The pain of betrayal still sat heavy in her chest, but Keen's words replayed in her mind like a secret melody. Your mother's shares can protect you, but you need proof. Every night, after most employees had gone home and the building lights dimmed, Ifeanyi stayed behind. She locked her office door, powered up her laptop, and dove into years of company records. Page after page of budgets, invoices, and bank statements filled her screen. At first, everything looked normal. Carefully arranged numbers, neat signatures, official stamps. But Ifeanyi had been in finance long enough to know when something smelled wrong. It started with a single payment, a large transfer to a small subcontractor she had never heard of. No project name, no contract details, just a shell company with an address that didn't exist on the map. Her pulse quickened. She dug deeper, tracing the account numbers late into the night. Soon, more suspicious payments surfaced. Millions of naira quietly flowing into similar shadow accounts, all connected by one thread, Nkechi's personal approval codes. The more Ifeanyi uncovered, the colder her blood ran. These weren't just accounting mistakes. This was theft dressed in pretty paperwork. Nkechi was siphoning company money to shell companies that led back to her family. If the transfers continued, Okari builders could collapse under hidden debts, leaving hundreds of workers jobless. Keen became her secret partner in the hunt. Almost every evening, he joined her after hours, carrying files and takeaway food to keep them going. Together they mapped every suspicious transaction, highlighting dates, amounts, and signatures. Sometimes, when the tension grew too heavy, Keen would crack a small joke to make her smile. Ife, you're scarier than half the auditors in Lagos, he teased one night, pointing at her color-coded spreadsheets. She smiled faintly but didn't stop typing. Their investigation stretched into long nights and quiet weekends. While the rest of Lagos danced to loud music and neon lights, Ifeanyi and Keen worked in silence, guided by the memory of her mother's steady wisdom. With every document they uncovered, Ifeanyi felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger at the betrayal happening right under her father's nose. Relief that she finally had proof strong enough to shake the boardroom to its core. By the end of the second week, a thick folder sat on her desk, a detailed report filled with evidence that could not be denied. Bank records, email chains, fake contracts, everything the board would need to see the truth. Ifeanyi looked at the folder late one night, her eyes burning from sleepless hours but her heart steady. This wasn't just about her position anymore. It was about justice, about protecting the company her mother helped build. For the first time since the crushing betrayal, she felt power return to her hands. The next meeting would not be just another board discussion. It would be the beginning of a reckoning. Chief Emeka summoned Ifeanyi to his private office late one humid afternoon. The air inside felt thick, heavy with the smell of polished wood and the tension of unspoken words. He sat behind his wide mahogany desk, dressed in a crisp white agbada, but his eyes were sharp and angry. Nkechi stood beside him in a bright red gown, her arms crossed and lips curled in a triumphant smirk. Ifeanyi, her father began, his voice cold and formal. I've heard troubling things about you. Staff members say you've been digging into company records without authorization, questioning budgets, and making accusations. Is this how you repay your family? By disrespecting my wife. Ifeananya stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her to hide their slight tremble. "Father, I am not disrespecting anyone. I am protecting the company. There are transactions, large ones, that don't add up. Money is being moved to shell accounts, all linked to Nkechi's approval codes. I have the documents to prove it." Before Chief Emeka could reply, Nkechi burst forward like fire catching dry grass. "Lies!" she shouted, her voice sharp enough to slice the room in two. "She's jealous, can't you see? She hates that I am stronger, that I have what she could never earn. This girl wants to destroy our marriage and turn you against me." Her earrings swayed as she pointed a trembling finger at Ifeananya. "She's been jealous of me since the day we married. This is all a pathetic attempt to regain attention." Ifeananya met Nkechi's glare with calm eyes. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about stolen money and betrayal. The board will see the evidence. Numbers do not lie." She placed a slim folder on the edge of the desk. "These are copies of the transactions. The originals are already secured." Chief Emeka's face tightened, the veins in his forehead pulsing. "Enough!" he thundered, slamming his palm against the desk. "You will not bring shame to this family. I will not allow my household to be torn apart by childish rivalry. If you continue with these accusations, I will cut you off, financially and personally. Do you understand me?" The words hit like stones, but Ifeananya did not flinch. She looked at the man who had once called her his pride and felt a sadness deeper than anger. He was blinded, trapped in a web of flattery and charm. No amount of shouting could wake him. Quietly, she picked up the folder and held it against her chest. "Then let the board decide," she said softly. "This company belongs to more than one person. The truth will speak louder than threats." Without waiting for permission, she turned and walked out of the office. Nkechi's furious voice followed her down the hallway, but Ifeananya didn't look back. Her heart ached, yet her steps were steady. She knew the storm ahead would be fierce, but she also knew she carried her mother's strength, and the truth like armor. The boardroom felt like a battlefield waiting for the first shot. Early that morning, the long glass table at Okuri Builders Limited gleamed under the soft lights, but the air inside was thick with unease. Senior board members sat in stiff silence, their eyes darting from one another as whispers floated through the room. Everyone had heard the rumors. Something about suspicious payments, hidden transfers, and a family fight boiling beneath the company's polished surface. No one knew the full story, but every person sensed that today's meeting would decide more than just numbers on a balance sheet. When the double doors finally opened, Ifeananya walked in with steady steps, a slim laptop in her hand and a folder tucked under her arm. Gone was the quiet daughter who usually sat at the corner of the table. Today she carried herself like a leader. Her dark suit was simple but sharp, and her calm expression revealed nothing of the storm inside her chest. Behind her, Keen followed with a small stack of documents, his eyes sharp and ready. Chief Emeka entered moments later, his agbada flowing like a king's robe. Nkechi trailed behind him, wearing a dazzling green gown and an expression of forced confidence. They took their seats at the head of the table, but even from across the room, Ifeananya could see the tension in her father's jaw. The chairman cleared his throat. "This emergency meeting has been called to discuss serious allegations of financial misconduct. Miss Ifeananya Okuri has requested to present her findings." He turned to her with a measured nod. "You may proceed." Ifeananya rose slowly, connecting eyes with each board member before speaking. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Members of the board, for weeks I have reviewed company records after noticing irregularities in our budgets and project accounts. What I found is alarming." She tapped her laptop, and the projector came alive with spreadsheets and bank statements. The room fell silent except for the soft click of slides. She highlighted large payments routed to unknown subcontractors, shell companies with no physical addresses, and suspicious transfers approved under Nkechi's personal codes. Each number glowed on the screen like a silent witness. "These accounts," she continued, pointing to a web of connections, "all trace back to relatives and associates of Mrs. Nkechi Okuri. Millions of naira have been moved without proper documentation. If this continues, our company faces not only financial loss but public scandal. Murmurs rippled around the table. One elderly board member adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "Chief," he said carefully, turning toward Emeka, "how did these payments escape your oversight?" Another director added, "This puts the company's reputation at serious risk. Investors will demand answers." Chief Emeka's face darkened, but he said nothing. Nkechi's smile had vanished, replaced by a tight, nervous glare. Ifeanyi finished her presentation with a steady breath. "I love this company. My late mother helped build it. I cannot stay silent while it is drained from within. I trust this board to protect our legacy." For a long moment no one spoke. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. The once silent board was no longer silent. Questions flew across the table. Sharp, direct, impossible to ignore. The tide had turned, and for the first time, Ifeanyi felt the power of truth filling the room like a rising sun. The boardroom felt heavier than ever that morning. Hours of tense debate had passed, with voices raised, questions asked, and challenges thrown across the polished table. Ifeanyi had presented every piece of evidence she had uncovered: the shell companies, the suspicious transfers, the red flags that no one could ignore. Chief Emeka had argued and protested, trying to defend Nkechi, but even his voice had lost some of its usual authority. The air was thick with frustration, fear, and anticipation. Every board member knew the next move would decide the company's future, and the balance of power within the family. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "We will proceed with a vote," he said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly as he held the ballot papers. "This vote will be secret. No one here should feel pressured by rank, family, or fear. Please cast your votes for the CEO position." Ifeanyi's hands were folded neatly in her lap, her heart hammering but her face calm. Across the table, Chief Emeka's fingers drummed against the wood. Nkechi's posture was rigid, her lips pressed together so tightly it looked as if she could barely breathe. One by one, the board members rose to submit their votes. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Whispers flew like sparks between the chairs, but no one dared speak openly. Ifeanyi kept her eyes forward, focusing on the folder in front of her, the evidence she had gathered like armor against betrayal. When the last ballot was collected, the chairman carefully counted the papers. Silence fell like a blanket over the room. He cleared his throat again and looked up, meeting every gaze. "The results are in," he said slowly. "By majority vote, the board has decided to remove Chief Emeka Okori as CEO of Okori Builders Limited." A collective gasp echoed around the room. Chief Emeka's hand froze mid-motion, his jaw slack. Nkechi's face went pale, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly seeming fragile, like it could crumble at any moment. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. The chairman continued. "Furthermore, the board has appointed Ifeanyi Okori as the new owner and chief executive of the company, citing her proven competence, years of dedication, and the legal shares left by her late mother." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. For a moment no one moved. Then one board member leaned back in his chair, muttering, "It's about time." Another whispered, "She's earned this." Ifeanyi felt her chest tighten, but she kept her expression composed. Relief, triumph, and a strange sadness mixed together. She had not wanted to humiliate her father. She had only wanted justice. For herself, for her mother, and for the company that had been her life. Chief Emeka's eyes flickered toward her, a mix of shock, pride, and regret. He opened his mouth, but no words seemed enough to undo what had happened. Nkechi, meanwhile, slowly sank into her chair, realizing that her schemes had failed. Ifeanyi rose, her voice steady but soft. "Thank you," she said, looking around the room. "I will honor the trust you've placed in me and protect the company we all love. This is not just about me. It's about safeguarding our legacy and ensuring that hard work and integrity guide every decision." The board members nodded in agreement, some even offering small, respectful smiles. In that moment, Ifeanyi understood something profound. Power could be taken, but respect and justice, once earned, could never be taken away. The boardroom was quiet now, but the silence was thick, heavy with tension and disbelief. Ifeanyi sat at the CEO chair, the polished wood beneath her hands feeling both foreign and familiar. She took a slow breath, steadying herself as the weight of responsibility settled over her shoulders. Around the table, the board members exchanged looks of respect, some nodding silently, others barely able to hide their relief that justice had finally been done. Across from her, Chief Emeka remained frozen. His usual commanding presence diminished to a stunned, almost helpless figure. He had once promised that seat to her, assured her that one day she would lead the company, and yet in recent months, he had allowed doubt and flattery to cloud his judgment. Watching her now, rising above betrayal and deception, he felt a pang of guilt that cut deeper than any reprimand could. Nkechi, realizing that her carefully plotted schemes had failed spectacularly, stormed out of the room. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor, echoing through the corridor as she disappeared, leaving a trail of anger and embarrassment in her wake. Her face, once so full of confidence, now wore the mask of defeat. Ifeanyi didn't flinch. She had expected this. She had prepared herself for it. Emeka finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Ifeanyi, I'm sorry. I should have seen through it. I should have listened to you. I failed as a father, and I failed as a leader. His hand shook slightly as he gestured toward the chair she now occupied. Ifeanyi looked at him, her eyes calm but filled with a quiet fire. She could feel the years of disappointment, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, all lingering in the air between them. Yet, beneath her anger, she felt a strange sense of compassion. This was her father, the man who had once inspired her, who had built the company she loved. "Father," she said softly, "I will not erase the past. But the future of this company cannot belong to emotion or favoritism. It belongs to integrity, dedication, and truth." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I am willing to give you a role here, but it must be ceremonial, advisory only. You must prove that you can put the company above personal feelings. Otherwise, this is your last chance to be part of it." Emeka's eyes shimmered with tears he refused to shed. He nodded slowly, humbled and chastened. He understood that the consequences of his choices were not easily undone, and yet there was a path to redemption, if he could walk it with honesty. Ifeanyi turned her attention back to the board, standing now with a gentle authority that commanded respect without demanding it. "Let us move forward," she said. "For the company, for our employees, and for the legacy my mother helped build. No one is above the rules, and no one will be allowed to destroy what we have worked so hard to create." In that moment, the boardroom felt lighter, as though a long-held tension had finally been lifted. Chief Emeka remained silent, humbled, realizing that his daughter's strength had surpassed his own, and that the seat he once promised to protect now held not just power, but the embodiment of integrity, courage, and justice. The next morning, Lagos was buzzing. News vans lined the streets outside Okiri Builders Limited, cameras flashing and reporters jostling for position. Social media exploded overnight with headlines like, "Daughter outshines father in historic boardroom coup," and "Young CEO takes charge after family betrayal." Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who had quietly become the most talked-about figure in business across Africa. Ifeanyi stepped up to the podium, her dark suit sharp, her calm presence commanding attention. The crowd hushed as she looked out over the microphones and cameras. She thought of her mother, of the late nights spent balancing budgets, of the betrayal and the hard work that had brought her here. Taking a slow breath, she spoke clearly and firmly, letting every word land. "Blood gave me a name," she said, her voice steady, "but hard work gave me power. Respect is earned, not inherited. This company was built on dedication, honesty, and the dreams of those who came before me. No one should ever think that their position is safe simply because of family ties or charm. Integrity matters more than anything else." Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in, and within minutes, her words were trending across social media platforms from Lagos to Nairobi, Johannesburg to Accra. Comments poured in. Thousands of young women, inspired by her courage, shared their own stories of fighting for recognition, for fairness, and for their rightful place in a world that often underestimated them. One journalist asked, "What message do you have for other young women facing obstacles?" Ifeanyi smiled softly, her eyes shining with determination. "Don't be afraid to stand for yourself. Work hard, gather proof, and never let anyone steal your voice. The world will notice your strength, even if those closest to you do not." That day she became more than a CEO. She became a symbol, a beacon of resilience and justice. Her story spread across Africa, reminding everyone that power belongs to those who earn it, and courage can change the course of a life, and even a company, forever.